increase shareholder return, especially for those that are publicly listed. And number two, I think most importantly, is to create full corporatization within the SOE. And that's why the law was made. The law itself focused a lot on business judgment rule, focus on the business so you don't get criminalized for the business judgment that you did. That's number one. Number two, we also have no politicians. We can't have politicians within the ecosystem, so it has to be full professional. And lastly, we can hire the best. We can hire not just Indonesians, but outside of Indonesia. We already know that all eyes is on Danantara, so the good thing about it is that everybody's looking at us, not just the parliament, but all facets of government. And at the end, we all report to the president. We're doing it for our legacy purpose. For us, reputation matters the most.
Is a second sovereign wealth fund really necessary?
Yeah, it's actually a very good question. I actually learned from our brothers in ASEAN. Singapore, a city of 6 million people, have 2 sovereign wealth funds. Malaysia, a country of 20 million people, I think has at least 2 or 3 sovereign wealth funds. We only have 1. So in fact, the market is large enough, the opportunity is large enough. We can actually have at least 2, right? In the Middle East, I think every country probably has at least 1 or 2 sovereign wealth funds. So depending on the size and the size of our population, definitely, and we're actually complementary to one another. Our focus really on optimizing the state-owned enterprise assets and also focus on creating large businesses. What INA does very well is doing partnership businesses. So in my view, it's so much opportunity among the two of us, and it's fine. You can choose partnership with INA, you can choose partnership with us, depending obviously on your risk parameters and the size you want to invest in.
Dividends from SOEs will be reinvested into strategic sectors instead of directly returning to state coffers. However, is there a potential risk of wasting valuable investment capital if an SOE that's being rescued continues to record losses? For example, in the case of Garuda.
Garuda is actually a great case. This is something where we think it's strategic for the country and many countries. You know, Singapore is actually a good example where I know Singapore Airlines is also strategic. You can see the amount that the government put, I think roughly around $3.5 billion of capital into, or probably more, into Singapore Airlines. We announced about a $400 million initial injection, but our idea is how do we fully transform Garuda into becoming a global organization. We're actually very excited on the prospect because the wonderful thing about Indonesia, even the domestic market is so large and underpenetrated, and there's so much demand domestically as well. And number two, and I think this is also not unique, we want to be able to have more foreigners coming into Indonesia and see how wonderful Indonesia is. And you know, the best way to do it is actually through the airline business, because it's, in a way, it's a feeder to Indonesia.
Is there a line that you would not cross?
If it's something where it's only for public goods and not for private, we already have within our Danantara law where it can be a public service obligation, which is, you know, wonderful, right? That's what will come from the state budget and they'll come in.
What are some of the key sectors for this year that Danantara is prioritizing investments in?
One is obviously in food security, energy security, downstream, which I know we've done well as a country the last 8 to 10 years. We're also focusing a lot on digital infrastructure. Healthcare will also be a big focus from us as well. And you know, in each of these sectors, we need to create, in a way, global mindset, large-size companies. So we will invest with partners, and I think a lot of what we do will do through partnership that can bring know-how. And this is by far the most important, because our job, the next 10 to 20 years, if we're half successful in what we do, we can increase the productivity per capita of our country, men and women.
President Prabowo recently said that he looked forward to close collaboration between Singapore's Temasek and Danantara in all sectors. Are there projects in the pipeline between the two?
One of the sectors that has been focused by our president is in renewable energy, especially after the leaders meeting. We'll look at opportunities together there. In the digital side, we'll also look at opportunities there. So we're open. We already know the style of investing, so I think that will be a straightforward collaboration.
President Prabowo Subianto has projected that the total SOE dividends could reach about $18 billion this year.
That's the net profit of the company, but obviously we can do that. One thing you have to know, in terms of the dividend that we receive, we can also do leverage on top of it. Because it's free and clear. When we talk about leverage in the system, the use of our capital is for productive capital. Different than the state, where obviously it has to be used for the purpose of everyone, you know, the population, without considering IRR return.